photographs here that I'll pass around for folks to look at. We talked a little bit about this one already, and if I can get you to start those around, please. This photograph, taken probably on August 29th, 1863, was taken from the bank just downstream of where we are on this side, looking back this way. And it is showing the railroad bridge between the North Shore, where we are parked, and Long Island ahead of us there. The next photograph that I'll hand around, it is taken from over on Long Island, looking back towards the North Shore. So it's taken from over there, looking this way. The two final photographs that I'll pass around are both taken from the South Shore, looking towards Long Island. So there, from our view right now, as you look across the bridge to the shed-like structure ahead of you there, beyond that you see the trees. Notice the steel structure rising above the trees. That is the drawbridge on the railroad bridge over the main channel of the Tennessee. As Ed said, the Tennessee River here is divided by a Long Island, imaginatively named Long Island. It is 7 miles in length. Beginning up here, we can't see from this perspective its northern tip, but that long, narrow island is 7 miles in length, stretching on downstream. And these two photographs are taken from the other shore, taken beyond the drawbridge, looking back this way across what was the main channel of the Tennessee. You can see the destroyed railroad bridge and then the pontoon bridge that was constructed between the South Shore and Long Island, as Ed related. So I'll pass those around to anybody who hasn't seen them. Now, where are we, and what are we doing here, and what are we standing on and all? We are at Bridgeport, a community that got its name because here was an interface between the railroad and the river. You have the bridge crossing the Tennessee River, and this was a place where water travel could interface with the railroad, so Bridgeport. It was not much of a town. In fact, by the fall of 1863, there was essentially no town whatsoever. Theodore Davis, the correspondent and artist, writes of the extremely enjoyable rainy night he spent in Bridgeport, sleeping under the only structure present, which was the railroad platform. This is the main point, or is such a primary point, because the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad Bridge crossed the Tennessee River here. The bridge, when originally constructed, was an entirely wooden structure, supported by wooden trestles and a wooden truss work, and then that truss work was then covered. With all that wood, guess what? It's susceptible to fire. And within just a year of being completed, the bridge burned. The Nashville and Chattanooga had now made a little money, and so they invested in a slightly more substantial bridge when they rebuilt it. Rather than have wooden trestles rise out of the water, they built cut limestone block piers, limestone piers, to support that new bridge. That's what appears in these photographs. That's what's keeping us from getting wet today. These 1850s limestone piers are still here. Those who are brave, who don't want to lose their hats or glasses, can lean over and look down and see them. Now, most of the piers today have been encased in concrete and steel. In the 1930s, when this more elaborate steel superstructure was placed on the piers, they had to be reinforced. This was the main railroad bridge until a few years ago when this modern bridge was constructed here. At the time that CSX constructed that bridge, the plan was to demolish this bridge, take the steel off of it, recycle it, and then blow up the piers and remove the piers from the river. When the local community got wind of that, they did not think much of losing the historic piers of the bridge. Calls were made to CSX headquarters in Jacksonville, and the standard CSX response was received. Laughter, and then the click of the phone as they hung up. People, however, were persistent, and people in the historical community on a larger basis got involved, as well as some prominent politicians, and eventually CSX was made to allow this bridge to survive. It has been transferred to the city of Bridgeport and now converted into this pedestrian bridge. So you can walk out onto a bridge that is supported by the historic piers, the piers that were here in 1863. When the Confederates retreated out of Middle Tennessee in early July, they did so and crossed the Tennessee River back towards Chattanooga. They initially maintained a small force on the north side of the river, but when Rosecrans began to project some limited force over the Cumberland Mountains in later July and early August, the Confederates withdrew back to the south side of the river. And when they did, they set fire to the wooden truss bridge over the Tennessee River. And there are several great accounts from Federals observing that fire burning the night that the Confederates set fire to the bridge. So Rosecrans knew that when he came to own Bridgeport, the bridge was going to have to be rebuilt. He has with him some engineers of the Boomer Bridge Company from Chicago, the country's biggest railroad bridge building company at the time, and they are prepared to begin directing the reconstruction of this bridge. Anybody want to guess how long Rosecrans and Boomer thought it would take to rebuild this bridge? Just 4 weeks. Now, they got that wrong, but there are a number of things that intervene, like the Battle of Chickamauga, the Siege of Chattanooga. It's actually not until January of 1864 that the bridge is finally rebuilt. They'll build another trestle-like structure across the bridge. But with Rosecrans, with Sheridan's division, as Ed related, coming here in late July, Rosecrans begins to take steps to rebuild the bridge. He will have men cutting timber in the forest for the bridge, as well as cutting timbers for the trestle work structure that you see being constructed here in late August. And this will become one of the major crossing points for Rosecrans' army. In fact, probably the greatest number of his wheeled vehicles, wagons, ambulances, and to a degree even artillery will cross the river here because of the pontoon and trestle bridges. As Ed said, the trestle bridge, because of the nature of these trestles and the soft bottom of the river, is not real sturdy and will collapse twice precipitating several mule teams and soldiers into the water, but only one mule will actually drown in those collapses. But the limited number of bridges, the bridge down at Caperton's Ferry, pontoon bridge at Caperton's Ferry, and the bridge here will bottleneck Rosecrans now in his advance towards the Sand Mountain Range and southeastward from this point. Well, at the time, the river here, right here at the bridge was quite deep, way too deep to ford or even think about swimming your horses. But the Tennessee River does not have a consistent bottom. There are some really deep points. In fact, right close to Chattanooga, there's a place that is over 80 feet deep in the river. And that's even the case right here. Just down at the end of Long Island, there is a shoal area. And the water level, because of the drought of 1862, 1863, was low enough at these shoal areas that at this one, at the end of Long Island, the water level was low enough that Rosecrans Cavalry, under David Stanley, Ed McCook's and George Crook's divisions, they crossed the Tennessee River by fording the river. And it was said the water came up to the saddle skirts of their horses. So the water level can vary greatly. Right here at the bridge site, it was a lot deeper, but too deep to ford or swim your horses. Well, I was going to say something else in that regard. The river is very susceptible to changes in elevation by the amount of rainfall at the time. And that's what's going to have an effect into the siege of Chattanooga. As we go through our story of the campaign, as we talk about on Saturday and Sunday, the siege and battles for Chattanooga, and eventually the new Union supply line into Chattanooga, the Cracker Line. This is essentially where the Cracker Line will begin. Rosecrans, knowing that the Confederates were going to destroy the railroad bridge here, knowing that even if he got Chattanooga very easily, it was going to take, he thought, 4 weeks to rebuild this bridge, 2 weeks to rebuild the Running Water Creek Bridge, that there would be a time before trains could bring supplies from Stevenson and Bridgeport on into Chattanooga. If he's going to push on down into Georgia, how's he going to supply that move? How else can you get supplies from Bridgeport to Chattanooga? What runs between Bridgeport and Chattanooga?
The river.
The Tennessee River. Well, if you're going to use the river to haul supplies, what are you going to need? Boats. What are the Confederates going to do with the boats that are on the Tennessee River? Take them, burn them, destroy them, do something with them. So guess what Rosecrans brought with him? Boats. Small steamboats purchased on the Ohio River, disassembled, and shipped in pieces down the railroad from Louisville to Nashville to Stevenson to Bridgeport. And they then began to reassemble the boats here at Bridgeport. These are the little boats that are then used in late October and into November for the Cracker Line into Chattanooga. Who gets the credit for all of that? Ulysses S. Grant. But who really had the forethought to bring those little boats along with him? William Stark Rosecrans. And the man principally in charge, certainly by October, in making those steamboats work is Leduc, an engineer. He's given the task of finally getting it completed and working again on the rivers. You wanted to add?
The only thing I've got to add is, as you saw the Trail of Tears sign, now this initially applied to the removal of the Cherokees. Now, if you were smart and a Cherokee, led by Ridge, Boudinot, Waddy faction, you will contract and go by river. These people had been the leaders in selling the land. Now the full-bloods, led by John Ross, who is only 7/8, only 1/8 Cherokee, they're the ones that contract to move themselves, and they will go overland. So if you're in the Ridge-Waddy faction, and this will play out through many years of feuds, and if you're a Cherokee, you know whether you go by water with the Ridge-Waddy faction or you go with the Ross faction, which suffers and has all the death and destruction on them. They move themselves, and they do not plan well. They'll carry these feuds over into the Indian Territory. The Ridges now, Al-Qaeda would admire because they carry out the assassination of the Waddy Ridge faction with no telegraph or anything. They'll assassinate Major Ridge. They'll assassinate Ellis Boutno and Mark Stanwaddy to be all assassinated at the same hour, 60 miles apart. And they'll be successful in assassinating Major Ridge and Ellis Boutno. Waddy will continue to cast his lot with the Confederates in the war, so that's very important. And the Ridge, they will know that. So that you can see there are other things about this. I think this was a great triumph here. And one question, how long does it take the Boomer Company to oversee the building of the
Running Water Creek Bridge? I guess we're going to be going real fast because here comes a train. The Boomer Company will not get the Running Water Creek Bridge built until February of 1864. But again, remember, they're interrupted by the Battle of Chattanoga, the siege of Chattanooga, and all of that. But it takes all the way to February to get it constructed.
Now, who?
Well, there.
Or the
Yeah,
Genesis?
there actually room. Plus, soldiers simply detailed through that room as enjoy the train, take a moment to look around, but also start back towards